Hey up guys, Mason in the Dark here, and today I wanted to talk to you about accessible gaming. I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again after this. Gaming is one of the things that I genuinely miss the most since losing my sight. Don't get me wrong, I have never been a hardcore gamer. By no means have I played all of the games out there, all of the popular games. I just have always enjoyed them when I was a kid. I was a big Crash Bandicoot fan, a big Tomb Raider fan. Like every person alive, I enjoyed the GTA games, etc., etc. And after losing my sight, I didn't really play them. I haven't played them until this year, when I found out that the Xbox had got the Copilot control, which, for those of you who don't know, Copilot is a software feature on the Xbox that allows you to essentially let two, not even essentially, actually, literally, allow two controllers to control a single player. So, for example, I've been playing Red Dead for a few months now, along with my girlfriend, and she has one pad, I have the other, and we sort of split the duties between us. She aims, I fire. Well, she walks around, I pick up the plants, we fish together, etc., etc. And it's really seamless. It never really overrides one way or the other. It really does just work as if you've got one big, massive control pad between you. But anyway, I had a very interesting and exciting experience actually this week. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine called Sarah Higgins offered me the chance to go to London to the RNiB offices, which, for those of you who don't know, the RNiB is the Royal National Institute for the Blind, and they are a charity that deals with visual impairment and blindness and sight loss, etc., etc. They've been getting increasing calls to sort of deal with accessibility in gaming, and they felt like they should put together a workshop, which I was invited to, thanks to knowing Sarah. So I actually wasn't sure about it, because I was like, oh, I have not really been, since I lost my sight, I don't particularly travel much. I mean, I've never been a big traveller, but at the same time, I really haven't gone many places since losing my sight. I went to Blackpool around 2 years ago now for a holiday, and that's probably the only time that I've left Stoke-on-Trent, unless I'm in a car with, say my dad, who we go and see my grandparents, his parents, in up north in Yorkshire. So that's only really the time that I leave. So going down to London was sort of like, it was quite nerve-wracking actually, just because living in Stoke-on-Trent, I've always thought of London as being this far away place. Like, okay, if you're going to go there, it's going to take you 4 hours plus to get there. You're going to have to get on a train and go that far. And it seemed like sort of an inaccessible place to me. But the RNiB were lovely enough to pay the expenses for the travel and got me on one of the high-speed trains that goes from Stoke to London, which means that I got to London in an hour and a half. Now that in itself just blew my mind. Like, an hour and a half is like, whoa, that's so much quicker than I thought it was going to be. What did make me laugh is we get on the train, and we set off, and the ticket guy comes along and he checks our tickets. That's fine, that's just standard. Anyway, from Stoke to Milton Keynes, there are no stops, so it's just constant all the way down. We get to Milton Keynes, which sort of gave me a little twinge of nostalgia, because I've been to a gig before in the Warriors. I went to Warriors Dance, which was a Prodigy gig / festival thing a few years ago at the Milton Keynes Bowl, and I was like, oh god, I'd love to go there again. So that made me think of that while we were sitting there. But as we set off from Milton Keynes to London, absolutely nobody come and check the tickets, and I was like, man, if you were in Milton Keynes, you could easily have just got on this train, get to London for absolutely free. And it just sort of made me laugh, because it was like, they obviously trust people from Stoke a lot less than people from down south. So the workshop itself was actually really, really interesting. There was only a limited number of people there, but one of them was actually a game developer, someone from Ubisoft that helped work on The Division, which I found really interesting. I actually thought that this whole thing had quite a lot of potential, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So I go to the RNiB offices. We go down underground. I don't know why it was underground. I think it's just that was the meeting room, but it also just made me laugh. And we go down, and the workshop consists of 3 presenters that have got a varying degree of sight loss. There was a couple of different visually impaired people there, and I really thought it was quite cool. I haven't really had the chance to sit and socialise with a bunch of other blind people, especially not ones my age. I went to like a RNiB Connect event earlier this year because I wanted to make those steps out into the blind community, especially with running this channel, which I really want to become something of a, I want it to become a snowball that can just mow down all the barriers in wrestling and make it a more accessible place. But I had to jump at this chance to take part in something to do with accessible gaming, just because I realised once I started playing Red Dead this year how much I actually had missed playing games, and sort of it reawoke that love in me. So we had the 3 presenters, and there was one of which was, I think, had lost his sight over time, one of which was a low vision person, and one of them was a self-professed gamer without sight, which isn't not a term that I've heard before, but actually makes a lot of sense. Just because blindness is such a broad spectrum, from people that just need glasses down to people like me who have absolutely no vision at all. And it was really interesting to sit in a room with people that were my age, because that RNiB Connect thing that I went to was more of a serious, what are the council going to do about this type deal, like town meeting kind of thing. And there was a lot of blind people there, but they were all older, whereas in this was the first time that I've got to sit down with a bunch of blind people who are my age or a bit younger, a bit older, and especially with us all being into games and getting to sit around and banter and talk about that. For me, I actually found it a really interesting experience, just because I felt like I was in somewhat of a unique viewpoint, just because it's not been long since I lost my vision completely. For those of you who don't know, I actually do know the exact date. It's February 13th, 2017 is when I had the surgery to remove my eye. And so it's only been, 2.5 years, coming up 3 years now. So the vast majority of my life, the big sum of my experience is as a low vision person. And so when people were talking about their experiences of low vision gaming and talking about having to get close to the screen but only seeing a portion of it because you've got to get so close to see stuff, but you're missing stuff on the other parts of the screen, the high contrast or low contrast causing problems, etc., etc. I felt like I related to all of these things, like small subtitles, text, and squiggly writing on letters that you might pick up, etc., etc. But at the same time, when Sightless Combat, who was one of the presenters, also has a YouTube channel, which is Sightless Combat with a K, like Mortal Kombat. He was talking about things from a blind person's perspective, and obviously I get to experience that perspective these days. So it was sort of interesting sitting in the middle as someone who, for the most part, has always been a low vision person, but these days is a blind one, and I felt like I just related to everyone's problems. And it was really, really interesting hearing different viewpoints talk about their different problems. My takeaway really from this, when it comes to accessibility, is that the Xbox is the most accessible. So when it comes to Android, iOS, smartphones, etc., you do have a lot of games that are either geared towards blind people or happen to be accessible. And there's a lot of text adventures and audio games. For example, one of the big audio games that you can download is A Blind Legend, which is a fantasy game, a bit of an open world type deal. And you have a guide in that, and it's your daughter. She runs ahead and she's like, "This way, father, this way," and you know which way you're going because of that. It's got all the steps and the immersive sounds, the 3D sound, which can really draw you in. And it's got a complete fighting system that's all based off audio cues, etc., etc. Anyone who actually fancies a go of that game, I'm not sure whether it has graphics or not, but if you actually fancied a game of something that you couldn't see or didn't need to look at, I'd actually say A Blind Legend is a pretty fun game for that. There was also different ones mentioned, like A Dark Room, which is not a game that was built for blind people but happens to be accessible, and Frequency Missing, I think, is another one that he mentioned. Frequency Missing was sort of like a role-playing, dramatised type game. They were saying that you had to scroll around the room, etc., using your finger, and when you when you release, that's when it selects something, which I feel like I would probably struggle with just because I'm so used to doing the double tap, so I feel like I'd take my finger off and select it and then probably not be able to figure out how to go back. It was really interesting hearing the low vision person talk about how older games were actually more accessible than games of today because you had high contrast colours, and it was more pixelated, and the characters, especially in fighting games like Virtual Fighter, were sluggish and slow, so you could actually see the movements better. And he talked about how as developers have tried to make things more real, they've actually made it harder for low vision gamers. And I actually do agree with that. As someone that was recently a low vision gamer, I remember playing, let's just go with GTA 5, which obviously is supposed to be super realistic. I know there's probably people nowadays that'd be like, actually, GTA 5 graphics are actually pretty shit now. But for me, GTA 5 was like madness. Like, the graphics for that were madness, because I always said to people that was more or less how I saw just, blocks of colour with little to no detail, etc., etc. So when I was running through GTA, I could never drive because I couldn't see the cars coming and I'd crash into them, etc., etc. So I used to just foot it round, get the super sprint on, run round, and I just used to sort of free run around. But even then, you would bump into lampposts or a stupid bike rail or something like that, just something randomly programmed to make it look more real. But because of the colour scheme, especially when you're running around the city, it's all greys, etc., etc., they all just blend into each other, which, in all fairness, it's a problem that I had in real life. That's not just a game problem. The world it blends into each other. The amount of lampposts that I've walked into over the years is absolutely crazy. So it was interesting hearing that, especially with it used to be that they had limitations. The games had limitations that actually made it more accessible. So now this guy was talking about Buggy Boy, which he said the track used to not let you off the track and it used to push you back on, which meant that you couldn't actually, go off and crash, which is one of the reasons why I've never played racing games, because I can't keep myself on the track and I've just span out of control. At the same time, they were talking about virtual reality, which is something that I think it's a shame that it's come about as I've lost my sight, essentially, because I think that the immersiveness of VR would have really helped me. As it was, I used to have to get really close up to the TV, like as close as I could, pretty much with my nose touching it, and sort of just try and see from that. Whereas I feel like if I'd have been able to play virtual reality, you've got the screen right there in front of you, you've got the immersive sounds, etc., etc. So, I'm of the belief that virtual reality will be what gives me my sight back anyway. There's no way It's going to be medical science, like trying to find a cure for blindness. It's going to be some guy who's trying to make his video games better. He's trying to make it more realistic or look better or feel more real, or he's going to be trying to, get a better experience of porn or something like that, and stumble across like, oh right, actually, if I do this, it sort of bypasses the optical nerve, etc., etc. So virtual reality always excites me, although a number of people there said that they really struggled with it and hadn't found one that was accessible. It seems like we're making a lot of steps forward, though, in these recent years. The Xbox is the most accessible because it's got the ease of access menu, which Microsoft has integrated, and it has a narrator and a magnifier, etc., etc. But this only works on the Xbox hardware and doesn't count in-game. However, there's a new act that's coming in, or has come in. It came in on the 3rd of December. It's called the CVAA, which means that all game UIs now have to be narrated and be accessible, which is a point that I hadn't really thought of, because Sightless Combat started talking about the fact that he plays a lot of competitive games like Gears of War, etc., etc., where you're setting up lobbies and matches, etc., etc., and where before he had to have a sighted person tell him what option was where, and then he had to memorize how many clicks to the right he was doing or whatever. Now it's actually narrated, and I found it really interesting that Gears of War itself as a series has been focusing on becoming accessible to an actual award-winning point. Gears of War isn't necessarily a game that I play myself. I'm not a first-person shooter kind of guy. Never have been. I don't really like competitive gaming. I'd much prefer an open world type game like a GTA or a Red Dead or a Saints Row or a Just Cause, etc., etc. I'm not a big fan of just, like the COD style of like running around trying to find your enemies and shooting them. But I found it really impressive when I was reading up about the Gears of War, especially Gears of War 5, which has just gone sort of balls to the wall in trying to be accessible. It's got, and not just for blind people too, it's gaming for everyone. So they've enabled the feature for you to be able to turn off the camera shake so that you don't get motion sickness. They've allowed for adjustable font size on the subtitles, which I know even sighted gamers would probably be excited about that. And they were talking about the fact that my mind's gone blank. Sightless was talking about the fabricator ping, which I'm sure Just Dan will know exactly what the fabricator is. I have no idea, but apparently it's really important in the Horde mode, and Sightless was talking about the fact that he got on to complaining to the Coalition about it, and they actually ended up adding in a sonar type ping that gets increasingly intense as you get towards the fabricator, which I thought was really, really cool, especially as someone that's trying to push for accessibility myself in like my own world. He's doing gaming, I'm doing wrestling, which mine's way more niche, but he actually got credited in the patch notes for that, which I thought was really, really cool. And I just thought it was amazing that they've put so much in detail into trying to make it more accessible, and it makes me really excited. Obviously the Xbox, again, one of the things that makes it so accessible is that co-pilot feature, which nothing else has. The PlayStation 4 does allow you to use the Titan 2 control, which is a hardware version of the co-pilot thing that allows you to split the playthrough, which Sightless said that he'd use to complete Uncharted 4 and another game that slips my mind now. Auto lock and aiming was another thing that they talked about at length, which I was in total agreement with. One of the reasons why I didn't particularly like, say, GTA 4 when it came out was it was a lot freer with the aiming. Red Dead, the original Red Dead, I really struggled with back then, because it's browns and beiges, and there's people that you can't see and they're firing at you from behind things, and I could just never do it. Whereas with an auto lock, You just got to press it and shoot. So it was a really eye-opening experience. Someone talked about PC games and how the PC is slightly more accessible than something like Android, which you have to, with iOS and Android and smartphones, you've got to rely on the app that you're using, recognising the fact that you're using a screen reader, because a lot of the time apps don't recognise that, so you're clicking around and it's unlabeled buttons, or it's just making the noise of you clicking on the screen but not doing anything. One of the reasons they were saying that the PC is more accessible for that is because you can use mods. People are out there making accessible mods for games. You can use OCR or optical character recognition to scan the text from games so that a screen reader can read it. And Sightless Combat actually talked about the fact that he goes through transcribing games for people who want to look at that. It really got me thinking about the future of accessible gaming and where it could go. And even just, I wish that there was things like, when I look back on my gaming experience now and I think about, like, say, playing GTA 5, I always wish there was a way of the GPS lighting up the road rather than needing to look at the minimap. Or even these days, I don't really see the excuse to not have a sat-nav. And you don't have to have it actually be like that. It should be in a menu, in an option. But at the same time, there's just no excuse to not have the capability for the sat-nav to be like, turn left, because I would have found that really, really useful. It also got me thinking about the 2K games and how much I wish that I could play the wrestling games, because when I've had the odd go using the co-pilot feature with Just Dan, it's been really, really fun. And it is a lot of fun, but there's also still the limitations there. Now, if they could put some work into making it accessible, such as, one of the good things is because of the CVAA, the menus will be narrated from now on, so I can at least actually look through and see what character I'm picking, or what number item I'm picking if I'm going to create the wrestler, etc, etc. But in terms of the gameplay, I'd like to see a few features with that, like I don't know, something, just haptics and vibrations would be really useful for it, like one vibration for when you get close enough for your opponent to hit you or you to hit them, maybe like a double vibration for when they reverse you, or just different things like that, so that you actually know. Because one of the things that Just Dan struggles with is when we're playing is like telling me when we're close enough for me to do something, and then obviously we struggle with the reversals, etc, etc. So it'd be a lot easier if there was some sort of haptics. I really, really enjoyed the day in general. I thought that it was a really productive day, and I actually hope that the RNiB can find some worth in it, because I'd like to see it become an annual thing. Like next year, if they did it and invited a few more people, and the year after that they invited a few more, I'd like to see it become sort of like the E3 of accessible gaming, like this convention where blind people and people with physical disabilities, they go, and the big AAA companies announce their big accessible features. Actually, one of the women that works for RNiB, Sonali Rai, I think she's called, and she's the broadcast and audio description specialist, she asked a question that I hadn't even really considered. She said, okay, so if we were to get a list of the top 50 games or the top 100 games, how many of those would be accessible? And the true answer is none. Not without sighted assistance or anything like that. There's not particularly accessible AAA games. Now, don't get me wrong, there's audio games out there that are designed for blind people that are immersive and fun. We've got Pitch Black, the AAA audio game that's trying to actually get made at the minute. It's in the Kickstarter phase, and stuff like that. So there are people trying to make good games, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want something that's geared towards blind people, that's designed for blind people. I want to be able to play Red Dead I want to be able to play GTA 6 when that comes out. I want to be able to play the remake of Resident Evil 3, or any of that type of thing. I want to be able to play the big mainstream games and have those experiences. I've absolutely loved playing Red Dead and having those experiences that I know other people have had. Being able to post, just today I posted on Twitter, last night I was playing, and we're going around, and we decide, right, let's go take down an O'Driscoll camp. And we go to the camp, we're about to start the fight, and as soon as we open fire, a bear descends on the fight and starts mauling the O'Driscolls, and then comes right after us. And it was just this big chaotic sort of, the O'Driscolls are shooting at us, and some of them are shooting at the bear and shooting at us, and it was just really chaotic and awesome. There was also a little bit not long before that where we'd had a fight with the Murphy brood, and we killed all of them, and we're riding through the area. A cougar comes jumping at us. We kill it with a bow because we're doing the challenges, and that's one of them, kill 5 cougars with a bow. So we kill it with the bow, one shot, bam, done. And then as we're riding, as we carry on riding, the second half of the Murphy brood come, and Arthur's like, "Got friends, do you?" And it really, really made it sound like he was saying it about the cougar. like the Murphy brood were like, "You killed that cougar, I'm gonna kill you." So it was a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed being able to play something and have the experiences that I know everyone else is having, as opposed to being like, "Oh, I've been playing this game that's designed for blind people, or this one that happens to be accessible." So yeah, I thought it was a really, really interesting day that I'd definitely like to see, something built from it, because it had a lot of potential, and it was the one thing that I thought when I was sitting there listening was, this has got the potential to grow into something massive, and actually really make a difference, because the guy sitting next to me was the man from Ubisoft, and he was just typing away at his notes the whole time, seeming really fascinated. He didn't even know what the co-pilot control is, and when he heard about that, he was like, "Oh wow, what is that?" and wanted to see videos of it in use, etc, etc. And it was sort of inspiring to see him sitting there and being like, "Oh yeah," and knowing that he's going to go back and have a report for the people that he works for, etc, etc, and might actually be able to suggest a couple of features that will make things easier in the long run. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next big accessible Ubisoft game or whatever. Never know, the next Division title might actually be really, really accessible. I just love things to take a step forward. I know that audio description isn't really going to be possible, although I don't see why it shouldn't be possible, at least in the cutscenes. Actually, one of the things that I liked about the Gears of War 5 thing was that the subtitles were actually designed to make it more immersive for the deaf players, in terms of describing contextual stuff like how loud an explosion was, or when the music starts or ends for a battle, so that they know. And I hadn't really ever thought of it in terms of in Red Dead, when you're running away from the lawmen or in a fight, the music picks up and it's all and then you run away or you win the fight and the music pans down and you know that there's no more enemies and you can just move on. Whereas if you were deaf, you might be like, is there more people coming? Is the battle over? Can I move on now? And I just thought it was really cool that Gears had thought about that. And it is a shame that it's a first person game, a first person shootery type thing, because it's just not my type of game. It was really interesting listening to Sightless Combat too, because he is someone that was born without sight. He's not lost his sight like I have. He's never been able to see. So he was very, very good at picking up on sound cues, etc. I know that at the minute he's playing that Jedi Fallen Order game, where he's actually managing to pull off all the wall runs, etc, etc, because there's sound cues for this and sound cues for that. And he also plays Killer Instinct, correct, which I know that he memorizes all the sound cues in terms of like the attacks and the counters and what the monsters are, etc. And it just sort of blew my mind because I haven't got to that point yet. I still can't differentiate noises from each other a lot of the time, especially not in the way he seemed to be able to. Like, like on Red Dead, sometimes we're running along and I'll be like mashing the A button, like, let's get faster, and then Leah like stop running with the horse and I won't even notice and just make it run more, and that's when we end up like falling off a cliff or something like that, and she's like, I stopped running, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I didn't notice. So it was really cool to see someone who just really knew the sound cues, etc., etc., and it sort of made me hope that maybe I can get used to that. I think at the same time that he uses like Turtle Beaches and stuff like that, and I'm just playing off a normal TV. It was just a really, really interesting experience. It was funny going down to London just because it may as well have not been, because I couldn't see anything, so it just felt like walking around. I could have easily just been in Stoke, but it was cool actually getting to go on a bit of a trip and just, like I say, take part in something like this, and sort of realise how at home I feel with my identity as a fully blind person now. Whereas I sitting there and I'm hearing about the low vision experiences and like, oh yeah, I remember that. But I think launching this channel has sort of definitely helped me along the way of just sort of accepting my identity as a fully blind person now. And it was nice getting to talk to people who only knew me as a blind person, because a lot of people, most of the people I know in my life, knew me as a sighted person or a low vision person, and they know me as the one that's lost the sight, and they always wonder if I miss it, or they think about the fact that I went through difficult times, etc., etc. But it was really nice to go into a room with a bunch of people and we barely even talked about our sight loss, other than the contextual things of the problems that we've had with this game and that game and this feature we'd like to see added in. It was a really, really refreshing experience that made me feel like an actual part of a community. So I really want to give a big thanks to sort of everyone who made that happen. So a big thanks to Sonali Rai and to Ian Hamilton. Thanks to both of the Sarahs, Higgins and Winch, for helping me out and inviting me there and helping me to the event. A big shout out to Addy, Matt and Sightless, who were the three presenters. It was a really, really interesting and sort of educational experience that, even though I didn't really learn anything that I hadn't learned, I at least learned that I made the right choice choosing an Xbox One, because that seems to be the most accessible platform, and hopefully at some point we're going to start getting games that are just completely accessible, and hopefully events like this can help push it towards that. So I'm pretty much done now. I just really wanted to let you all know about that, because I don't really do episodes like this where I'm just talking to you about experiences of my life, and it was actually a really interesting experience. So yeah, I just wanted to let you all know what I've been doing with my week and sort of let you in on my world. So if you've got any thoughts about this, you can drop them in the comments section, you know where that is, or you can tweet me at Mason_WITD. If you like this episode, hit that like button. Every interaction makes the YouTube algorithm like me more, and if you want to hear more about accessible gaming or about wrestling, subscribe and you'll never miss an episode of the WITD podcast. I'm off, guys, and you should have a good one.